The alarm clock rings at 6 a.m. sharp across Pyongyang, but it's not just any alarm. It's the same patriotic march playing through state-controlled speakers across the entire city, waking up 2.6 million people simultaneously. This isn't your typical travel destination where you can roll out of bed whenever you want and grab a latte from the corner cafe. This is North Korea, officially known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and if you're planning to visit here with just $500 in your pocket, you better be prepared for the most controlled, bizarre, and eye-opening experience of your entire life. Most people think North Korea is completely off-limits to tourists, but here's the thing that'll shock you. It's actually possible to visit, and people do it every year. The catch: everything you see, eat, and experience is carefully orchestrated by the government. Every conversation is monitored, every photograph is pre-approved, and every step you take is watched. But what if I told you that beneath this theatrical performance, real people live real lives, find love, struggle with money, and yes, even laugh at jokes behind closed doors? Today, we are attempting something that sounds absolutely insane: surviving in North Korea for 5 days on just $500. That might sound impossible when you consider that most North Korean tours cost upwards of $2,000, but we're going to break down exactly what life costs inside the world's most secretive nation. We'll uncover the underground economy that the government doesn't want you to know about, meet the women who are quietly revolutionizing North Korean society, and find out if you can actually eat well in a country where most people survive on corn and kimchi. From the marble palaces of the Pyongyang Metro that double as nuclear bunkers to the hidden dating culture that could land you in a labor camp, we're about to pull back the curtain on one of the world's last remaining mysteries. The North Korean government has spent decades perfecting the art of showing visitors exactly what they want them to see. But what happens when you start looking beyond the propaganda posters and choreographed smiles? Comment with the number 3 if you've ever wondered what it would actually be like to live under one of the world's most authoritarian regimes, because what we found out will change everything you thought you knew about the Hermit Kingdom. North Korea sits on the Korean peninsula like a fortress that time forgot. The country spans roughly 46,000 square miles, making it slightly smaller than Mississippi, but what it lacks in size it makes up for in geographical drama. The northern border with China stretches for 880 miles along the Yalu and Tumen rivers, creating a natural barrier that has become one of the most militarized frontiers on Earth. These rivers freeze solid in winter, which explains why most North Korean defectors attempt their dangerous escapes during the coldest months when they can literally walk across the ice into China. The eastern coast faces the Sea of Japan, while the western shores meet the Yellow Sea, giving North Korea access to both fishing grounds and potential naval routes. But here's where things get interesting. Despite having all this coastline, ordinary North Koreans can't just hop on a boat and sail away. Every vessel is registered with the military. Every fishing trip is monitored, and the penalty for attempting to escape by sea can be execution. The landscape itself tells the story of isolation. About 80% of North Korea is mountainous, with the Taebaek Range running down the eastern spine of the country like a backbone made of granite and limestone. These mountains aren't just scenic backdrops, they're natural fortresses that have shaped Korean culture for thousands of years. The highest peak, Mount Paektu, sits right on the Chinese border and rises 9,022 feet into the sky. According to North Korean mythology, this is where Kim Jong-il was born during a battle against Japanese forces, marked by a bright star and double rainbow. Never mind that historical records show he was actually born in a Soviet military camp in Russia. The southern border is where geography becomes politics in the most dramatic way possible. The Korean Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, stretches 160 miles from coast to coast and is 2.5 miles wide. This strip of land has become an accidental nature preserve since no human has been allowed to live there for over 70 years. Korean tigers, bears, and leopards roam freely through the minefields and razor wire, creating one of the most surreal wildlife sanctuaries on the planet. But the DMZ isn't just a border. It's a scar across the Korean peninsula that has separated families for generations. The military demarcation line runs right down the middle, marked by concrete barriers, watchtowers, and enough landmines to blow up a small country. South Korean guards face north, North Korean guards face south, and in the joint security area at Panmunjom, they literally stare each other down across a few feet of concrete. This geographical isolation has shaped every aspect of North Korean society. Unlike other countries that might have porous borders with friendly neighbors, North Korea is effectively an island. China tolerates them as a buffer against American-allied South Korea. But their relationship is more like a parent dealing with a rebellious teenager than genuine friendship. Russia provides some support, but even Vladimir Putin keeps North Korea at arm's length. The result is a country that has developed in complete isolation from global trends, technological advancement, and cultural exchange. While the rest of the world was embracing the internet, smartphones, and social media, North Korea was building an entire society based on self-reliance, or as they call it, yuch. This philosophy of independence sounds admirable until you realize it means cutting yourself off from medical advances, educational opportunities, and even basic entertainment that the rest of the world takes for granted. The transportation network reflects this isolation perfectly. There are no international flights except to Beijing and a few other carefully controlled destinations. The road system connects major cities, but private car ownership is virtually non-existent outside of Pyongyang's elite. Most people travel by train on a system built during Japanese occupation in the early 1900s, and these trains move at a pace that would make a Victorian railway engineer feel right at home. Rivers carve through the landscape, providing hydroelectric power and irrigation for agriculture, but they also serve as internal borders. Travel between provinces requires special permits, and many North Koreans have never seen the ocean despite living in a peninsula surrounded by water. The government has effectively used geography to create internal islands of control, where people can spend their entire lives within a 50-mile radius of where they were born. This geographical isolation has created one of the world's most unique societies, where people live remarkably normal lives within remarkably abnormal constraints. Wake up in a typical North Korean city at 7 a.m., and the first thing you'll hear is the national anthem playing through speakers mounted on every street corner. This isn't optional background music. It's the daily reminder that you live in a country where even your wake-up call is controlled by the state. Housing in North Korea operates on a system that would confuse most Americans. There's no real estate market, no landlords, and definitely no Zillow listings. The government assigns apartments based on your job, family size, and most importantly, your political loyalty rating. This rating, called songbun, determines everything from where you can live to what food you can buy, and it's inherited like a genetic disease that can curse your family for generations. A typical North Korean apartment in Pyongyang might have 2 or 3 rooms, shared bathroom facilities down the hall, and electricity that works maybe 16 hours a day on a good day. Heat comes from coal or wood stoves, which means families spend their weekends hunting for fuel instead of binge-watching Netflix. The walls are thin enough to hear your neighbors' conversations, which actually serves the government's surveillance purposes perfectly. But here's what tourists never see. North Koreans have become masters of adaptation. When the electricity goes out, they switch to battery-powered radios. When the heating fails, they wear multiple layers and crowd together in the warmest room. When food rations run short, they supplement with vegetables grown in tiny garden plots or purchased from semi-legal markets. The daily routine starts early because everything takes longer when you can't just order it online. Shopping means visiting state-run stores where the selection changes based on whatever the government decides to stock that week. Milk might be available on Tuesdays, soap on Fridays, and meat almost never unless you're celebrating a major holiday or know someone with connections. Work assignments are permanent and non-negotiable. If the government decides you're going to be a factory worker, that's your career for life. If they assign you to agriculture, you'll be farming until you're too old to lift a hoe. There's no LinkedIn, no job hunting, and definitely no career counselors. Your profession is determined by the state's needs, your family's political status, and sometimes just bureaucratic randomness. The workday officially lasts 8 hours, but most North Koreans participate in additional volunteer activities that aren't actually voluntary. This might mean staying after work to study political theory, participating in mass games practice, or helping with construction projects around the city. Refusing these activities is considered unpatriotic and can affect your songbun rating for years to come. Evenings are family time by necessity rather than choice. Entertainment options are limited to state-controlled television programming, which features a steady diet of propaganda documentaries, revolutionary operas, and news about agricultural achievements. Most programming ends by 10 p.m., and the television literally broadcasts a test pattern until the next day's programming begins. But North Korean families have found ways to create their own entertainment. Card games, storytelling, and informal music sessions happen behind closed doors. Children play traditional Korean games that their grandparents taught them, creating a cultural continuity that has survived decades of political upheaval. The black market, which the government officially denies exists, operates through a network of relationships and whispered recommendations. Someone's aunt might have access to Chinese soap through her job at a border factory. Someone's neighbor might trade homemade alcohol for rice. These transactions happen in private homes, behind market stalls, and through coded conversations that sound innocent to outside observers. Women have become the backbone of this underground economy. While men are locked into their assigned government jobs, women often have more flexibility to trade goods, run small businesses from their homes, and navigate the complex web of relationships that keeps families fed and clothed. They've developed an entire shadow economy that operates parallel to the official state system. Medical care is theoretically free and universal, but the reality is more complicated. Hospitals exist, but they often lack basic supplies like antibiotics, anesthesia, and even electricity for equipment. Doctors are well trained but forced to work with resources that would shock medical professionals anywhere else in the world. Patients bring their own sheets, food, and sometimes even light bulbs for their hospital rooms. Despite these challenges, North Koreans have developed remarkable resilience. They've learned to fix everything instead of replacing it, to preserve food without refrigeration, and to stay warm without central heating. These aren't just survival skills, they're cultural adaptations that have created a society unlike anywhere else on Earth. Now, let's talk about food, because if you're trying to survive in North Korea on $500, understanding the cuisine and food economy is absolutely crucial. North Korean food culture is built around the concept of making a little go a very long way. And after decades of economic isolation, they've perfected the art of creating satisfying meals from simple ingredients. The foundation of every North Korean meal is rice, but not the fluffy, abundant rice you might expect. During the economic difficulties of the 1990s, known euphemistically as the Arduous March, many North Koreans learned to stretch their rice by mixing it with corn, barley, or even pine bark. This practice has continued even when food security improved, partly out of habit and partly because it's still more economical. Kimchi is absolutely everywhere, but North Korean kimchi is different from its South Korean cousin. It's typically less spicy, uses more seafood in the fermentation process, and often includes ingredients like pollock or small shrimp. The fermentation process serves a crucial nutritional purpose during long winters when fresh vegetables are unavailable. Families spend entire autumn weekends preparing massive batches of kimchi in a process called kimjang, which is equal parts food preparation and social event. Naengmyeon, or cold buckwheat noodles, is considered North Korea's national dish, and it's a perfect example of their approach to cuisine. The noodles are made from buckwheat grown in North Korea's mountainous regions, served in a cold broth that's both refreshing and filling. The toppings might include thin slices of beef if you're lucky, pickled vegetables if you're middle class, or just the broth if you're stretching your budget. Street food exists, but it operates in a legal gray zone that depends heavily on local officials looking the other way. Vendors sell hotteok, sweet pancakes, corn on the cob, and various fried snacks from small carts or temporary stands. The prices are incredibly low by international standards, maybe 50 cents for a filling snack, but they represent a significant expense for someone earning the average North Korean wage of 2 to 3 per month. The restaurant scene in Pyongyang caters primarily to the political elite and the occasional tourist group. These establishments serve elaborate Korean banquets with multiple courses, traditional entertainment, and prices that would shock ordinary North Koreans. A single meal at one of these restaurants could cost more than most people earn in several months. But here's where our $500 budget challenge gets interesting. Tourist prices and local prices exist in completely separate universes. While tourists pay international rates for everything, the domestic economy operates on a completely different scale. A kilogram of rice might cost a tourist $5 in official shops, but locals access the same rice through ration systems or private markets for the equivalent of 50 cents. The key to stretching $500 in North Korea is understanding these parallel economies. Official tourist restaurants will drain your budget in 2 days, but if you could somehow access local markets, that same money could feed a family for months. Of course, tourists can't actually shop in local markets or eat at neighborhood establishments, which is exactly how the government maintains control over the visitor experience. Local markets, called jangmadang, have become the heart of North Korea's evolving economy. These markets started as emergency measures during the famine of the 1990s, but they've evolved into sophisticated trading networks where people buy and sell everything from Chinese electronics to homemade clothing. The government tolerates these markets because they've become essential for survival, but they also regulate them heavily to prevent any challenge to state authority. Seasonal eating dominates North Korean cuisine out of necessity. Summer brings fresh vegetables like cabbage, radishes, and cucumbers. Autumn means apple harvests in some regions and the crucial kimchi preparation season. Winter food consists primarily of preserved vegetables, pickled foods, and whatever protein sources families manage to secure during warmer months. Protein is the ultimate luxury. Beef is so rare that it's reserved for major holidays or special political celebrations. Pork is more common but still expensive. Chicken exists but is often raised in small backyard coops where families trade eggs for occasional meat. Fish provides the most accessible protein, especially for families living near the coasts, but even fishing is regulated by the state. The government's public distribution system theoretically provides basic food rations to all citizens, but the reality is more complicated. Rations depend on your job category, political loyalty, and regional food availability. Factory workers might receive different rations than farmers, and people in Pyongyang generally eat better than those in rural areas. Understanding North Korean food culture means understanding the social rituals around eating. Meals are communal events where families share from common dishes, and refusing offered food is considered deeply impolite. Tea culture is important, with corn tea being more common than traditional leaf tea due to cost and availability. The brewing and distilling tradition continues despite government regulations. Soju exists, but many families make their own alcohol from rice, corn, or sweet potatoes. These homebrewed beverages serve social functions at celebrations and help preserve food through fermentation processes. For someone trying to survive on $500, the mathematical reality is stark. Tourist meal prices could consume your entire budget in a week, but the ingredients for those same meals cost local families a few dollars in the domestic economy. This price differential illustrates the broader economic reality of North Korea. Two completely separate economic systems operating within the same geographical space. Food in North Korea tells the story of adaptation, creativity, and survival. It's a cuisine born from necessity but elevated by centuries of culinary tradition. Every meal reflects the broader political and economic realities of life in the world's most isolated country, where even something as basic as dinner becomes a complex negotiation between individual needs and state control. The social dynamics of North Korean dating and relationships would surprise most outsiders who assume everything is completely controlled by the government. While it's true that romance operates within strict boundaries, young North Koreans have developed sophisticated ways to meet, court, and form relationships that would be recognizable to young people anywhere in the world. Traditional Korean courtship customs remain strong in North Korea, but they've been modified by decades of socialist ideology and practical constraints. Dating typically begins in the early 20s after military service for men and university or work assignments for women. The government officially discourages romantic relationships during school years, viewing them as distractions from political education and academic achievement. Meeting potential partners happens through carefully orchestrated social networks. Work units, neighborhood organizations, and political study groups serve as informal matchmaking venues where young people can interact under officially sanctioned circumstances. These settings provide cover for romantic interest while maintaining the appearance of political and professional engagement. North Korean women have specific beauty standards that blend traditional Korean ideals with socialist practicality. Pale skin remains highly valued, but unlike South Korea's intense beauty culture, North Korean standards emphasize natural appearance over cosmetic enhancement. Makeup is limited and expensive, so beauty routines focus on skincare and grooming rather than dramatic transformation. Hairstyles are actually regulated by the government, with approved cuts for both men and women. Women can choose from about 18 officially sanctioned styles, while men have even fewer options. These regulations extend to clothing, with bright colors and Western-style fashion strongly discouraged in favor of modest, practical attire. Despite these restrictions, young North Korean women have found subtle ways to express individuality and attract romantic attention. A particular way of styling the approved haircuts, carefully chosen accessories, or slight variations in clothing can communicate personality and interest while staying within official guidelines. The actual process of dating requires creativity and discretion. Public displays of affection are strongly discouraged and can attract unwanted attention from authorities. Couples often meet in groups, take walks in approved public spaces, or attend cultural events where interaction appears coincidental rather than planned. Private meetings are challenging, but not impossible. Young couples might arrange to accidentally encounter each other at markets, libraries, or during work-related activities. These meetings require careful coordination and trusted friends who can provide alibis or distractions if needed. Gift-giving in North Korean courtship reflects both economic constraints and cultural values. Expensive presents are impractical and might attract suspicion about the source of funds. Instead, couples exchange handmade items, books, or small tokens that demonstrate thoughtfulness rather than wealth. A carefully copied poem, a pressed flower, or a small piece of traditional Korean craft can carry enormous romantic significance. Family involvement in relationship decisions remains crucial. Parents and extended family members evaluate potential partners based on political reliability, family background, and economic prospects. The songbun system means that romantic choices can affect entire families for generations, making partner selection a strategic decision that extends far beyond personal preference. Marriage typically occurs in the mid to late 20s for women and slightly older for men. The wedding ceremony itself is relatively simple compared to South Korean or Western standards. Government officials must approve the marriage, and the ceremony usually includes political elements alongside traditional Korean customs. Living arrangements after marriage depend entirely on government housing assignments and family connections. Young couples might live with parents for years while waiting for their own apartment assignment. This extended family living situation provides economic benefits but limits privacy and independence. The government's population policies influence relationship dynamics in unexpected ways. Families are encouraged to have children, but economic constraints make large families impractical for most people. Contraception exists but isn't widely available, leading to family planning through traditional methods and social pressures. Women's changing economic roles have begun shifting relationship dynamics. As women become more involved in market activities and small businesses, they're gaining economic independence that affects partner selection and marriage negotiations. This economic empowerment is subtle, but represents a significant cultural shift. Underground cultural influences from China and South Korea impact dating culture despite government efforts to prevent foreign influence. Young people who have access to smuggled music, movies, or fashion incorporate these elements into their romantic lives in carefully hidden ways. The consequences of violating relationship norms can be severe. Premarital pregnancy might result in forced marriage, loss of educational opportunities, or social ostracism. Adultery can lead to criminal charges and imprisonment. These stakes make relationship decisions carry weight that young people in other countries might not fully understand. Despite all these constraints, love stories continue to unfold across North Korea. Couples find ways to build meaningful relationships, create intimate bonds, and establish families within the system's limitations. Their romantic lives might look different from those of young people in Seoul or New York, but the fundamental human desires for connection, companionship, and love remain unchanged. The secret dating culture of North Korea represents both adaptation and resistance. Young people work within the system's constraints while maintaining their humanity and emotional needs. Their relationships become small acts of independence that assert individual desires within a society designed to prioritize collective goals above personal happiness. North Korea's festivals and cultural celebrations present a fascinating paradox where genuine tradition, political propaganda, and mass entertainment blend into spectacles that are simultaneously authentic and completely artificial. These events serve multiple purposes: preserving Korean cultural heritage, demonstrating political loyalty, and providing entertainment for a population that has limited access to international media. The mass games represent the most spectacular example of North Korean cultural performance. These events involve tens of thousands of participants creating human mosaics, synchronized gymnastics displays, and elaborate theatrical performances that can be seen from space. Every movement is choreographed, every costume is identical, and every participant has spent months in preparation for their moment in the spotlight. What makes these performances uniquely North Korean is how they transform individual expression into collective art. Participants aren't performing as individuals. They become pixels in a massive human television screen. Children as young as 5 years old participate, learning to subordinate personal desires to group achievement. The result is breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. Traditional Korean holidays continue to be celebrated, but they've been modified to serve political purposes. Lunar New Year, called Seol in Korean, remains the most important family holiday. Families gather to perform ancestral rituals, share traditional foods, and exchange gifts. However, the celebration now includes mandatory political education sessions and community service activities organized by neighborhood committees. The Day of the Sun, celebrating Kim Il-sung's birthday on April 15th, has become North Korea's most important national holiday. The entire country shuts down for elaborate celebrations including parades, fireworks, and mass dancing events in public squares. Citizens dress in their finest clothes, which often means their only good outfit, and participate in carefully choreographed displays of joy and loyalty. Music plays a central role in North Korean cultural life, but it operates within strict ideological boundaries. Revolutionary songs praising the leadership and socialist achievements dominate official performances. However, traditional Korean folk music continues to thrive in private settings and approved cultural venues. The gyeogyam, a traditional Korean zither, remains popular and provides a connection to pre-socialist Korean culture. The Arirang Festival combines traditional Korean performing arts with modern political messaging. This massive outdoor performance involves over 100,000 participants and tells the story of Korea through dance, music, and spectacular visual effects. The festival runs for several months and serves as both cultural preservation and political education. Dancing holds special significance in North Korean social culture. Public squares across the country host evening dance sessions where citizens gather to perform traditional Korean dances and approved contemporary choreography. These events provide rare opportunities for social interaction, exercise, and collective entertainment that doesn't require government approval or supervision. The Pyongyang International Film Festival showcases North Korean cinema alongside carefully selected international films. North Korean movies typically focus on themes of sacrifice, loyalty, and socialist achievement. Production values can be surprisingly high, but the narratives are predictably ideological. International films are chosen to demonstrate either the superiority of socialist values or the problems of capitalist societies. Art exhibitions and cultural displays emphasize socialist realism and revolutionary themes. Paintings typically depict idealized workers, bountiful harvests, and heroic military figures. Traditional Korean art forms like calligraphy and pottery continue, but they're expected to serve political purposes rather than purely aesthetic goals. Theater performances blend traditional Korean dramatic forms with socialist messaging. Classical Korean stories are reinterpreted to emphasize themes of collective struggle and political awakening. Modern plays often focus on historical events that demonstrate the wisdom of the leadership or the evil of foreign influence. Seasonal festivals maintain connections to agricultural cycles and natural rhythms that predate political systems. Harvest festivals celebrate agricultural achievements while providing opportunities for communities to gather and share food. Spring planting ceremonies invoke traditional blessings while emphasizing the importance of agricultural self-sufficiency. Children's cultural education begins early with participation in youth organizations that combine political education with artistic training. Children learn traditional Korean dances, songs, and crafts alongside political theory and leadership worship. These activities serve both cultural preservation and political indoctrination purposes. The choreographed nature of public joy creates a surreal atmosphere where genuine emotion and political performance become indistinguishable. Citizens participate in mass celebrations with apparent enthusiasm, but determining whether this represents genuine happiness or practiced compliance becomes impossible for outside observers. Sports events serve similar dual purposes, combining athletic competition with political demonstration. Soccer matches, basketball games, and athletic competitions provide entertainment while showcasing the physical fitness and competitive spirit of socialist citizens. International competitions become opportunities to demonstrate national superiority through athletic achievement. Private cultural activities happen in homes and small community gatherings where families maintain traditions that might not conform to official cultural policies. Storytelling, traditional cooking, and informal music sessions preserve cultural elements that predate the current political system. The result is a cultural landscape where authentic Korean traditions survive within a framework of political control. Citizens participate in elaborate public performances while maintaining private cultural lives that provide continuity with their historical identity. These festivals and celebrations demonstrate both the power of state control and the persistence of human cultural expression. Understanding the economic reality of North Korea requires examining two completely different monetary systems operating within the same borders. The official economy, controlled entirely by the state, exists alongside a thriving informal economy that has become essential for survival but remains technically illegal. The average official salary in North Korea ranges from $2 to $5 per month, which sounds impossibly low until you understand that this represents payment for government-assigned jobs in a system where housing, health care, and basic food rations are theoretically provided by the state. These salaries haven't increased significantly in decades despite inflation and changing economic conditions. The public distribution system was designed to provide all citizens with basic necessities through government rations and services. During North Korea's economic peak in the 1970s and 1980s, this system actually functioned reasonably well. Citizens received rice, cooking oil, clothing, and other essentials through their workplace or neighborhood distribution centers. However, the economic collapse of the 1990s destroyed this system's effectiveness. The government could no longer provide adequate rations, leading to widespread famine and forcing citizens to develop alternative survival strategies. These strategies evolved into the current parallel economy that operates alongside but independent of official government systems. The jangmadang markets represent the heart of North Korea's modern economy. What started as emergency food trading during the famine has evolved into sophisticated commercial networks where people buy and sell everything from household goods to electronics. These markets operate with government tolerance because they've become essential for basic survival. Currency in North Korea is more complicated than most visitors realize. The official North Korean won is rarely used for significant transactions. Instead, people prefer Chinese yuan or US dollars for major purchases. This dollarization reflects both the instability of the local currency and the importance of cross-border trade with China. Exchange rates fluctuate wildly and depend heavily on black market conditions. The official exchange rate bears no relationship to actual purchasing power, while the black market rate changes based on political tensions, border security, and seasonal factors affecting trade with China. Rural areas operate on different economic principles than urban centers. Farmers are allowed to keep a percentage of their harvest, which they can trade in local markets. This agricultural surplus becomes the foundation for rural economic activity, with farmers trading crops for manufactured goods, tools, and household necessities. Pyongyang residents generally enjoy better economic conditions than people in other parts of the country. The capital receives priority for food distribution, electricity, and consumer goods. This economic privilege is both a reward for political loyalty and a practical necessity for maintaining the regime as Showcase City. Private business ownership is officially prohibited, but entrepreneurial activities flourish under various legal covers. Women often run small businesses from their homes, selling homemade food, clothing, or household items. These businesses are technically illegal, but tolerated as long as they remain small and don't challenge state authority. The service economy operates through personal relationships and informal networks. Repairs, transportation, tutoring, and other services are exchanged through barter systems or small cash payments. These transactions rarely appear in official economic statistics, but represent a significant portion of actual economic activity. Remittances from China play a crucial role in many families' economic survival. North Koreans working in Chinese factories, restaurants, or construction sites send money home through informal transfer systems. These payments often exceed official salaries by 10 or 20 times, making them essential for family welfare. Consumer goods availability varies dramatically based on location and connections. Pyongyang markets might offer Chinese electronics, South Korean cosmetics, and even some Western products. Rural areas might have access only to basic necessities and locally produced items. The cost of living comparison becomes absurd when viewed from an international perspective. A luxury apartment in Pyongyang might cost $100,000 to purchase through unofficial channels, but the same money could feed a rural family for decades. This price disparity reflects both the scarcity of quality housing and the concentration of wealth among the political elite. Healthcare costs exist despite the official policy of free medical treatment. Patients often pay for medicine, medical supplies, and even electricity for medical equipment. A serious illness can bankrupt a family, leading to difficult choices between medical treatment and basic survival needs. Education expenses also contradict official policies. While schooling is theoretically free, families pay for uniforms, supplies, and various fees that make education increasingly expensive. Private tutoring, which is technically illegal but widely practiced, can consume a significant portion of family income. Transportation costs vary based on official versus unofficial options. Official bus and train tickets are cheap but unreliable. Private transportation through unofficial taxis or shared rides costs more but provides better service and flexibility. The clothing economy operates through multiple channels. State-produced clothing is cheap but limited in style and quality. Chinese imports cost more but offer better quality and variety. Homemade clothing represents a compromise between cost and personal expression. For our $500 budget challenge, these economic realities create an impossible situation. Tourist prices exist in the international economy, where $500 might cover a few days of official tours and meals. Local prices exist in the domestic economy, where $500 represents several months of average income. The challenge isn't just financial, it's navigating between two completely separate economic universes within the same geographical space. Understanding North Korea's cost of living means understanding how people survive in an economy where official policies, actual prices, and survival necessities exist in constant tension. It's an economy built on adaptation, creativity, and the human capacity to find solutions when official systems fail to meet basic needs. Transportation in North Korea reflects the broader themes of control, limitation, and adaptation that characterize every aspect of life in the Hermit Kingdom. The infrastructure tells the story of a country that was once connected to the broader world, but has spent decades developing in isolation, creating systems that are simultaneously impressive and dysfunctional. The Pyongyang Metro system stands as perhaps the most famous example of North Korean transportation infrastructure. Built in the 1970s with Soviet assistance, the metro tunnels extend over 100 meters underground, making them some of the deepest subway stations in the world. This depth isn't accidental. The entire system doubles as a massive nuclear bunker capable of sheltering hundreds of thousands of Pyongyang residents in the event of war. Each metro station is decorated like an underground palace, with marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and elaborate mosaics depicting scenes from Korean history and socialist achievement. The Pohang station features artwork celebrating North Korea's space program, while the Yonggwang station displays tributes to the country's electrical power systems. These decorations serve both aesthetic and political purposes, transforming mundane transportation into daily exposure to state propaganda. The trains themselves are a mixture of vintage East German cars from the 1980s and newer Chinese models. Service runs from 5:30 a.m. to midnight, with trains arriving every 2 to 3 minutes during peak hours. The system carries over 300,000 passengers daily, making it an essential lifeline for Pyongyang residents who have limited access to private transportation. However, tourists typically see only 2 carefully selected metro stations during guided visits. The government controls which stations foreigners can access, ensuring they experience the most impressive and well-maintained portions of the system while avoiding areas that might contradict the official narrative of prosperity and progress. Bus transportation in Pyongyang consists of electric trolleybuses and imported diesel buses that serve different social classes. The trolleybuses, powered by overhead electrical lines, provide cheaper transportation for ordinary citizens. The imported buses offer more comfortable service at higher prices and cater to the growing middle class of government officials, successful traders, and other privileged residents. Beyond Pyongyang, transportation becomes significantly more challenging. Intercity buses operate on irregular schedules and often break down due to poor road conditions and lack of maintenance. Rural roads are frequently unpaved, making travel during rainy seasons difficult or impossible. The railway system spans the entire country and serves as the primary long-distance transportation method for most North Koreans. However, traveling by train requires special permits to move between provinces, and these permits can take weeks to obtain. The trains themselves are slow, overcrowded, and often delayed by power outages or mechanical problems. International rail connections exist with China and Russia, but these routes are primarily used for freight rather than passenger service. The Trans-Siberian Railway technically connects North Korea to Europe, but civilian access is extremely limited and requires extensive paperwork and government approval. Private car ownership in North Korea remains almost exclusively limited to the political elite and successful black market entrepreneurs. The few private vehicles on Pyongyang streets are typically expensive imports from China or older Japanese cars obtained through unofficial channels. Gasoline is scarce and expensive, making car ownership impractical even for those who could afford to purchase a vehicle. Bicycles serve as the primary personal transportation for most North Koreans. Unlike cars, bicycles don't require special permits or expensive fuel, making them accessible to ordinary citizens. However, even bicycle ownership requires registration with local authorities, and the bikes themselves must be purchased through official channels or expensive black market transactions. Walking remains the most common form of transportation throughout North Korea. Cities are designed around pedestrian traffic, with wide sidewalks and pedestrian-only areas that accommodate the reality that most people travel on foot. This pedestrian-focused infrastructure creates surprisingly walkable urban environments, despite the lack of modern amenities. Air transportation is strictly controlled and primarily serves the political elite. Pyongyang's international airport handles a few flights daily to Beijing and occasional flights to other approved destinations. Domestic flights are rare and typically reserved for high-ranking officials or emergency situations. The architectural landscape of North Korea's transportation infrastructure reflects the country's political priorities and aesthetic values. Grand boulevards in Pyongyang are designed to accommodate massive military parades and political demonstrations rather than efficient traffic flow. These streets are impressively wide but often eerily empty, creating a surreal urban environment that prioritizes spectacle over functionality. Monuments and architectural statements dominate the transportation landscape. The Arch of Triumph, built to commemorate Korean resistance to Japanese occupation, stands taller than Paris's Arc de Triomphe. The monument to party founding features a massive hammer, sickle, and writing brush representing workers, farmers, and intellectuals, respectively. These monuments serve as navigation landmarks while providing constant reminders of political ideology. Traffic control in Pyongyang is managed by female traffic officers who direct the minimal vehicle traffic with elaborate, choreographed gestures. These officers, selected for their appearance and trained in synchronized movements, represent another example of how even mundane city services become performance art in North Korea. The maintenance and repair economy around transportation operates through informal networks and creative adaptation. Spare parts for vehicles and public transport are scarce, leading to extensive black market networks and innovative repair solutions. Mechanics become highly valued specialists who can keep aging equipment operational through ingenuity and resourcefulness. For someone attempting to survive on $500, transportation costs would represent a significant budget consideration. Tourist transportation operates at international price levels, while local transportation remains affordable but inaccessible to foreigners. This parallel pricing structure means that getting around North Korea as a visitor costs exponentially more than it does for residents, even though the infrastructure and services are essentially identical. The transportation system ultimately reflects North Korea's broader approach to modernization, impressive showcase projects alongside practical systems designed for control rather than efficiency. Every journey becomes a reminder of the state's power to grant or restrict movement, while the infrastructure itself tells the story of a country that has chosen isolation over integration with the global transportation networks that connect the rest of the world. North Korea's natural landscape presents a stunning contradiction to its political reputation, featuring some of Asia's most pristine wilderness areas and dramatic mountain scenery. However, experiencing this natural beauty as a tourist means navigating layers of political messaging and strict government control that transform every hiking trail and scenic overlook into carefully managed propaganda experiences. Mount Paektu dominates North Korea's mythological and geographical landscape. This volcanic mountain on the Chinese border rises 9,022 feet above sea level and features a stunning crater lake called Heaven Lake. According to North Korean official history, this mountain serves as the birthplace of the Korean people and the sacred site where Kim Jong-il was born during his father's guerrilla campaign against Japanese occupation. The reality is more complex and geologically fascinating. Mount Paektu is an active volcano that last erupted in 1903, and scientists consider it one of the most dangerous volcanic systems in the world. The mountain straddles the Chinese-North Korean border, and the crater lake is actually shared between the two countries. Chinese tourists can access the mountain from their side of the border, while North Korean access is strictly controlled and limited to approved tour groups. Visiting Mount Paektu as a tourist involves multiple layers of political theater. Guides provide extensive lectures about the mountain's significance to Korean nationalism and the Kim family mythology. Visitors are expected to show appropriate reverence at designated viewpoints and participate in ritualized expressions of respect for the sacred site. The Myeohyang Mountains, located north of Pyongyang, represent another significant natural attraction that doubles as a political pilgrimage site. These mountains feature beautiful hiking trails, ancient Buddhist temples, and diverse wildlife. However, the area is dominated by the International Friendship Exhibition, massive underground facilities displaying gifts given to North Korean leaders by foreign dignitaries. Hiking in the Myeohyang Mountains requires following designated trails with government guides. The natural beauty is genuinely impressive, featuring waterfalls, ancient trees, and mountain vistas that rival any national park in the world. However, the experience is constantly interrupted by political monuments and ideological commentary that transforms nature appreciation into political education. The coastal regions offer different but equally controlled natural experiences. North Korea's eastern coast along the Sea of Japan features dramatic rocky cliffs and small fishing villages that provide glimpses into traditional Korean coastal life. The Chilbo Mountains near the coast combine mountain and seaside scenery in a region that remains relatively undeveloped by modern standards. Wonsan, North Korea's largest port city, serves as a gateway to coastal recreation areas that the government has developed for domestic tourism. The city features beaches, hot springs, and mountain resorts designed primarily for the political elite and foreign visitors. These facilities provide luxury accommodations and recreational activities that contrast sharply with the economic conditions experienced by ordinary North Koreans. The Kumgang Mountains, located near the DMZ, represent one of Korea's most famous scenic areas and have been the subject of poetry and art for centuries. These mountains feature dramatic granite peaks, pristine forests, and scenic valleys that have inspired Korean culture for over 1,000 years. However, access to this region is extremely limited due to its proximity to the heavily militarized border zone. National parks in North Korea exist primarily on paper, with limited infrastructure for conservation or visitor services. The government lacks resources for proper park management, and environmental protection often conflicts with economic needs and political priorities. However, this neglect has inadvertently preserved wilderness areas that might have been developed in other countries. Wildlife in North Korea includes species that have become rare or extinct in other parts of Asia. The DMZ has become an accidental wildlife sanctuary where Korean tigers, bears, and various bird species thrive in the absence of human development. However, Viewing this wildlife requires special permits and government supervision that make authentic nature experiences nearly impossible. Seasonal changes dramatically affect access to natural areas. Winter tourism is limited due to harsh weather conditions and heating fuel shortages that make mountain accommodations uncomfortable or dangerous. Spring and autumn provide the best weather for outdoor activities, but these periods coincide with agricultural seasons when transportation and accommodation resources are prioritized for economic activities rather than tourism. The environmental challenges facing North Korea's natural areas include air pollution from coal-burning power plants, deforestation driven by fuel shortages, and soil degradation caused by intensive agricultural practices. Climate change is affecting mountain ecosystems and coastal areas, but the government has limited resources to address these environmental concerns. Photography of natural areas operates under strict regulations that often seem arbitrary to visitors. Certain scenic viewpoints are approved for photography, while others are prohibited for security reasons that aren't always clear. The resulting photos often capture beautiful landscapes but miss the broader environmental and social context that would provide a complete picture of North Korea's natural heritage. Adventure tourism possibilities exist, but remain largely theoretical due to government restrictions and infrastructure limitations. The mountains offer excellent hiking and climbing opportunities, the coasts provide potential for water sports, and the winter landscape could support skiing and other cold weather activities. However, these activities require equipment, training, and freedom of movement that aren't compatible with North Korea's controlled tourism model. For budget travelers, natural attractions represent some of the best value experiences in North Korea. Unlike urban attractions that require expensive entrance fees and guided tours, natural areas often provide impressive scenery and outdoor activities at relatively low cost. However, accessing these areas still requires expensive tour packages and government supervision that make independent nature travel impossible. The contrast between North Korea's natural beauty and political restrictions creates a unique travel experience where breathtaking scenery exists alongside constant reminders of state control. Every mountain vista comes with political commentary. Every hiking trail includes ideological education, and every natural wonder serves dual purposes as both scenic attraction and propaganda tool. Understanding natural tourism in North Korea means accepting that authentic wilderness experiences are impossible within the current political system. However, the natural beauty itself remains genuine and impressive, providing glimpses of Korea's environmental heritage that has survived decades of political upheaval and economic challenges. Healthcare and education in North Korea operate under official policies that promise universal access and high quality, but the reality involves significant challenges that affect every aspect of daily life. These systems reflect both the government's socialist ideals and the practical constraints of operating essential services in an economically isolated country. The healthcare system is officially free and universal, with the government providing medical treatment, preventive care, and pharmaceutical services to all citizens. This system was genuinely effective during North Korea's economic peak in the 1970s and 1980s, when the country had sufficient resources to maintain hospitals, trained medical professionals, and import necessary medicines and equipment. However, the economic difficulties of the 1990s severely damaged the healthcare infrastructure. Hospitals now operate with limited electricity, insufficient medical supplies, and aging equipment that often doesn't function properly. Patients frequently provide their own bed sheets, food, and even light bulbs for their hospital rooms. Medical professionals in North Korea receive extensive training and education, often studying for 7 to 8 years to become fully qualified doctors. The medical curriculum emphasizes both Western scientific medicine and traditional Korean healing practices, creating a hybrid approach that combines modern diagnostics with herbal treatments and acupuncture. The pharmaceutical situation represents one of the most serious challenges facing North Korean healthcare. International sanctions have severely limited access to modern medicines, forcing doctors to rely on outdated drugs, traditional remedies, or medications of questionable quality smuggled from China. Patients with serious conditions often cannot access the treatments that would be standard in other countries. Preventive medicine and public health programs continue to function relatively well, with extensive vaccination campaigns, health education programs, and disease monitoring systems. The government prioritizes preventing epidemics and maintaining basic public health standards, even when curative medicine faces resource constraints. Dental care operates at a basic level, with limited access to modern equipment or procedures. Most dental work involves extractions and basic repairs rather than preventive care or cosmetic treatments. Oral hygiene education is widespread, but access to quality dental products is limited. Mental health care remains a significantly underdeveloped area, partly due to cultural stigma and partly because of limited resources for psychological services. Depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions are often treated through traditional family support systems rather than professional mental health services. The education system begins with universal kindergarten and continues through 12 years of mandatory schooling. The curriculum combines academic subjects with extensive political education, physical training, and practical work experience. Students spend significant time studying the history and achievements of North Korean leadership alongside mathematics, science, and literature. University education is available but highly competitive and depends heavily on political loyalty and academic achievement. Kim Il-sung University in Pyongyang represents the pinnacle of North Korean higher education, while technical institutes and regional universities provide specialized training in engineering, agriculture, and other practical fields. Foreign language education focuses primarily on Chinese and Russian, with English becoming increasingly important due to its role in international communications and technology. However, language learning operates within strict ideological boundaries that limit exposure to foreign media and cultural content. Scientific education and research continue despite international isolation, with North Korea maintaining programs in nuclear physics, computer science, and medical research. However, limited access to international scientific literature and collaboration restricts the development and application of advanced research. Teacher training and education represent significant challenges, with educators often lacking access to modern teaching materials, technology, and international educational developments. Teachers are expected to serve both educational and political functions, incorporating ideological messages into every subject area. Educational infrastructure varies dramatically between urban and rural areas. Pyongyang schools often feature modern facilities and equipment, while rural schools might lack electricity, heating, or basic supplies. These disparities reflect broader patterns of resource allocation that prioritize the capital city over other regions. Higher education financing operates through government allocation rather than student payment, but families often face significant unofficial costs for uniforms, supplies, and various fees. Students from politically reliable families have better access to prestigious universities and programs. Adult education and literacy programs continue throughout people's lives, with workplace political study sessions that combine ideological education with practical skills training. These programs serve both educational and political control functions. International educational exchange is extremely limited, with only a few North Korean students studying abroad in China or Russia each year. These students face extensive background checks and monitoring, and they must demonstrate exceptional political loyalty to qualify for foreign study opportunities. The safety aspects of both healthcare and education reflect broader security concerns in North Korean society. Hospitals and schools serve as monitoring points where the government can observe citizens' behavior and political attitudes. Medical records and educational files become part of each person's permanent political dossier. For visitors attempting to understand these systems on a limited budget, direct experience is nearly impossible. Tourist medical care operates through special facilities designed for foreigners, while educational institutions typically allow only carefully orchestrated visits that showcase the best facilities and most politically reliable students and staff. The intersection of healthcare and education creates a population that is generally well informed about basic health practices and literate in multiple languages, despite limited access to international information. This educational foundation represents one of North Korea's genuine achievements, even as economic constraints limit the practical application of these knowledge and skills. Both systems demonstrate the broader challenges of maintaining social services in an isolated economy while serving political control functions. They represent genuine efforts to provide essential services while operating under constraints that would challenge any government, creating outcomes that are simultaneously impressive and inadequate depending on one's perspective and expectations. Obtaining permission to visit North Korea involves navigating one of the world's most complex and restrictive visa processes, where every step is designed to maintain government control over who enters the country and what they experience during their visit. Understanding this process is essential for anyone considering travel to North Korea, especially those attempting to do so on a limited budget. Tourist visas for North Korea don't technically exist in the traditional sense. Instead, visitors receive a tourist card that serves the same function but emphasizes the temporary and controlled nature of their presence in the country. This semantic distinction reflects the government's view that North Korea is not a typical tourist destination, but rather a socialist paradise that grants selected foreigners the privilege of brief visits. The visa application process must be completed through authorized tour companies rather than directly through North Korean embassies or consulates. This requirement ensures that every visitor is part of an organized tour group with government-approved guides and itineraries. Independent travel is absolutely prohibited, making it impossible to explore North Korea without constant supervision. Nationality significantly affects visa approval prospects and restrictions. Citizens from South Korea are generally prohibited from visiting North Korea except under special circumstances involving family reunification or government-approved exchanges. American citizens face additional scrutiny and restrictions, particularly following diplomatic tensions and high-profile detention cases involving American tourists. The application requires extensive personal information, including detailed employment history, educational background, and reasons for wanting to visit North Korea. Applicants must demonstrate that their visit serves legitimate tourism purposes rather than journalism, political activism, or intelligence gathering. The government conducts background checks that can take several weeks or months to complete. Financial requirements for North Korean tourism go far beyond the visa fee itself. Tour packages typically cost between $1,500 and $5,000 per person, depending on the length of stay and level of accommodation. These packages must be paid in advance and include all transportation, accommodation, meals, and guided activities within North Korea. The tour company selection process requires careful research, as different agencies offer varying levels of service and have different relationships with North Korean authorities. Reputable companies maintain offices in Beijing and employ experienced guides who understand both tourist expectations and North Korean regulations. Pre-departure briefings are mandatory and cover extensive rules about behavior, photography, and interaction with North Korean citizens. These briefings emphasize that violations of local laws can result in detention, imprisonment, or worse. Tourists must acknowledge understanding these risks and agree to follow all guide instructions without question. Prohibited items include GPS devices, professional cameras with telephoto lenses, religious materials, political literature, and anything that could be construed as propaganda critical of the North Korean government. Even items like South Korean products, American newspapers, or books about North Korean politics are strictly forbidden. Photography restrictions are extensive and often seem arbitrary to visitors. Military installations, construction sites, poverty, and unofficial daily life activities are generally prohibited subjects. Even approved photography often requires specific permission from guides, and all photos are subject to review before departure. Communication with the outside world is severely limited during visits. Mobile phones don't work with international networks, internet access is restricted to a few government-controlled facilities, and international calls are expensive and monitored. Tourists effectively disappear from global communications networks during their visit. The entry process involves flying through Beijing, with very limited alternative routes through Russia or other countries. The flight from Beijing to Pyongyang takes about 1 hour, but the journey represents crossing from the connected world into complete isolation. Customs inspections are thorough and can involve detailed examination of all luggage and electronic devices. Tourist accommodations are limited to government-approved hotels that cater specifically to foreign visitors. These facilities operate at international standards but remain isolated from the broader North Korean society. Guests cannot leave hotels unaccompanied and must participate in all scheduled activities with their assigned tour groups. Guide supervision is constant and comprehensive. Tourists are never alone and must travel in groups with at least 2 government-assigned guides who monitor all activities, conversations, and interactions. These guides are well-trained, multilingual, and skilled at managing tourist experiences while ensuring compliance with government regulations. Departure procedures can be stressful, involving thorough searches of luggage and electronic devices to ensure no unauthorized materials are being removed from the country. Photos are reviewed, documents are examined, and any suspicious items can result in delays or confiscation. The cost structure makes budget travel to North Korea essentially impossible through official channels. The $500 budget challenge becomes theoretical because legitimate tourism requires expenses that far exceed this amount before even considering daily living costs within the country. For those determined to visit North Korea, the visa process represents just the beginning of a highly controlled experience that prioritizes political messaging over authentic cultural exchange. Every aspect of the visit is designed to showcase North Korean achievements while preventing unauthorized observation of daily life conditions. The restrictions and supervision involved in North Korean tourism create a unique travel experience where visitors see impressive sights and receive extensive cultural education while remaining completely isolated from genuine interaction with North Korean society. This controlled tourism model serves the government's political purposes while generating foreign currency and maintaining tight control over outside influences. Understanding the visa process reveals the broader reality that tourism in North Korea isn't really tourism in the conventional sense. It's a carefully orchestrated political performance where visitors become temporary participants in an elaborate theatrical production designed to promote government ideology while generating revenue from foreign sources. After spending 5 days attempting to survive in North Korea on just $500, the mathematical impossibility becomes starkly clear, but so does something far more profound about human resilience, adaptation, and the complexity of life inside the world's most isolated society. The budget challenge wasn't really about money. It was about understanding how people create meaningful lives within systems designed to control every aspect of their existence. The $500 wouldn't have lasted 2 days if spent through official tourist channels, where a single meal at a government-approved restaurant costs more than most North Koreans earn in a month. But this price disparity reveals the deeper truth about North Korean society. It operates as 2 completely separate worlds occupying the same geographical space, with entirely different economic realities, social rules, and daily experiences. What emerges from this exploration isn't the cartoonish dictatorship that dominates international headlines, but a more complex reality where ordinary people navigate extraordinary constraints with creativity, humor, and determination that would be recognizable to anyone who has ever faced seemingly impossible circumstances. North Koreans wake up each morning and solve problems, care for their families, fall in love, argue with neighbors, and dream about better futures. The women running small businesses from their apartments, The families gathering for kimchi preparation sessions that double as social events, the young couples finding ways to meet despite official restrictions, the mechanics who keep ancient buses running through ingenuity and spare parts traded through underground networks. These people aren't victims or automatons. They're human beings who have adapted to circumstances that most of us can't imagine. The food culture reveals this adaptation most clearly. North Korean cuisine has evolved into something uniquely practical and deeply cultural, where every meal reflects both traditional Korean heritage and the pragmatic reality of making satisfying food from limited ingredients. The way families stretch rice with other grains, preserve vegetables through fermentation, and create celebratory meals from simple ingredients demonstrates a culinary creativity born from necessity but elevated by generations of cultural knowledge. The architecture and transportation systems tell the story of a society that has chosen isolation over integration, creating impressive showcase projects alongside practical infrastructure designed more for control than convenience. The Pyongyang Metro stations are genuinely beautiful and functionally effective, but they also serve as daily reminders that even basic transportation becomes political performance in North Korea. The social dynamics around dating and relationships reveal perhaps the most human aspects of North Korean society. Young people find ways to meet, court, and build relationships that transcend political restrictions. They adapt traditional courtship customs to modern constraints, creating a dating culture that serves both individual desires and social expectations while avoiding political complications. The festivals and cultural celebrations demonstrate how genuine tradition and political propaganda can coexist in the same events. The mass games are simultaneously breathtaking artistic achievements and disturbing displays of collective control. Traditional Korean holidays continue to provide family bonding and cultural continuity while serving government messaging purposes. The economic realities show a population that has become remarkably resourceful at creating alternative systems when official systems fail to meet basic needs. The jangmadang markets, the informal service economy, and the complex networks of relationships and reciprocity that keep families fed and housed demonstrate entrepreneurial skills that would thrive in any economic system. Healthcare and education reveal both the achievements and limitations of attempting to provide universal services in an isolated economy. The commitment to literacy, preventive medicine, and technical education has created a well-educated population with practical skills, even as resource constraints limit access to modern medicines and international educational opportunities. The natural beauty of North Korea provides a stunning backdrop for all these human dramas. The mountains, coasts, and forests represent both the geographical isolation that shapes North Korean society and the environmental heritage that connects contemporary North Koreans to centuries of Korean culture and history. The visa process and tourism restrictions create a travel experience unlike anywhere else in the world, where every interaction is choreographed and every site is filtered through political messaging. Yet even within these constraints, visitors can glimpse the humanity and complexity that exists beneath the propaganda and performance. The $500 budget challenge ultimately reveals that understanding North Korea isn't about money or tourism logistics. It's about recognizing that political systems, no matter how controlling, cannot completely suppress the human capacity for adaptation, creativity, and connection. North Koreans have created rich, complex lives within constraints that would challenge anyone, and their society reflects both the limitations imposed by their government and the resilience that allows them to thrive despite those limitations. What would it cost to truly understand North Korea? More than $500. More than any budget could cover. It would require setting aside preconceptions, looking beyond headlines, and recognizing that the 25 million people living there are neither the heroic socialist citizens of government propaganda nor the oppressed automatons of international media coverage. They're people who wake up every morning and figure out how to live meaningful lives within the circumstances they face. The hermit kingdom isn't really hermit-like for the people who live there. It's home, With all the complexity, frustration, joy, and humanity that home entails for anyone, anywhere, the $500 might not buy much in North Korea's tourist economy, but the exploration it inspired reveals riches that no amount of money could purchase. A deeper understanding of human adaptability and the recognition that even the world's most controlled society cannot completely control the human spirit. Comment with the number 7 if this journey behind the walls of the Hermit Kingdom has changed your perspective on what it means to survive, adapt, and find humanity in the most unlikely places. The real treasure isn't what $500 can buy in North Korea. It's what we can learn about ourselves by understanding how others live under circumstances we hope never to face.